Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Nice to see some of my students here. Welcome to everybody, all of our guests, our colleagues, and community partners. I'm excited to be here hosting this event. My name is Cabria Baumgartner, and I am the Dean's Associate Professor of History and Africana Studies here at Northeastern. And I'm also one of the faculty co-leads working on the Reckonings Project, which is a local history platform that seeks to highlight the histories and commemorative landscapes of Black Boston. So we've worked on a range of projects, which you can learn more about by visiting our website, reckoningsproject.org. And thank you for spending your evening with us. I know it is a lovely day, and the sun is kind of calling us, but it's wonderful to be in this space with you and to be able to screen this wonderful documentary, In Search of Phillis Wheatley Peters. And it's a treat that we have the filmmakers here with us for this screening and panel discussion. So let me give you a sense of the agenda. There will be a meditation, which is a reading of the poems of some of the poems of Phillis Wheatley Peters, or at least inspired by that by Phillis Wheatley Peters, by Jija Azaglo. I will then introduce the filmmakers who will share some remarks for framing the documentary that we'll see. The documentary runs about 35 minutes, so we'll view that. And then we'll move into our panel discussion, which features Dr. Nicole Aljo from the English department, Denise Washington from right here in Roxbury, and the filmmaker, Leslie Askew. I will moderate this discussion, and then we'll have time for your questions about the film, questions about this particular time period. This is the 250th celebration of the founding of the United States. And of course, we want to complicate what we mean by celebration, right? We want to think about who we're celebrating and what we're celebrating. So maybe you have some questions along those lines. We'll then conclude our evening with remarks from Jija Azaglo. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge some key people who made this event possible. Of course, our thanks to the Mellon Foundation for supporting the Reckonings Project. Many thanks to our Reckonings team, some of who are here this evening. Our project manager, Jen Grieve, thank you. Our community partnership coordinator, Jija Azaglo, who you'll be hearing from in a second. Our PhD students who are here, and our student co-ops. Many, many thanks to all of you for helping with this event, and of course to our filmmakers and our panelists. Okay, so I have one request for you before we get started, and that is to please silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. I was just at a talk that was actually at a church, and the phones were going off all the time. And so just want to make sure that we're all present here for these 2 hours we'll be here. I invite you to bring your full self to this space, listening and thinking together, and hopefully gaining some inspiration, especially in these really challenging times. So to the first part of our program, we have Jija Azaglo, and I just want to read to you a little bit about her. Jija is a Ga-Ewe folklorist, sound collage performing artist, and mystic whose work lives at the intersection of collective community memory, womanist theology, and somatic healing. Through call and response, she crafts sonic experiences that honor traditional storytelling while making space for contemporary voices. At the heart of her practice is a commitment to awakening the power and abundance present in communal bodies and to building cultures of care and freedom through creativity. Jija is the founder of the Black Cotton Club and co-founder of the Department of Public Imagination alongside Crystal B. She holds a master's in divinity and currently serves as our community liaison, right, for the Reckonings Project. So Join me in welcoming Jija.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you. Word. Are y'all excited to be here? I don't believe you. Are you excited to be here? Yes. All right. And so I have the honor of centering us before we watch this screening and hear from the voices that will be on our panel discussion. And so while it may not be custom to do a meditation before a documentary, I find it very special that we get to do that in the honor of these words from Phillis Wheatley. And so I invite you to get into a comfortable position for whatever your body has the capacity to hold in this moment. And the invitation that I have for you is just you listen. And if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. And if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, maybe soften your gaze. And in this moment, I invite you to listen to the sound of my voice, and maybe my voice becomes the backdrop and the heat takes center. Or maybe the heat then takes a background and someone else is moving and that really catches your attention. But just listen. And maybe at this moment, your mind is now wondering what it should be doing, or could be doing, or would have been doing if you weren't here. And I invite you to just watch it as you would a commercial, not engaging with it. The dishes will get washed when it should. That paper will be written when it will. Right? The readings will be done at some point in time. Watch it as you would a commercial, not trying to engage. Just watch it. I invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. One more time, take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. And as you're listening, I invite you to hear the words of Phillis Wheatley and my own, in which she names an hymn to humanity as an invitation for humanity to see themselves in the divine. And what she might name as the divine, I name a glitch, an opportunity to meet yourself and opportunity. And if my voice becomes a backdrop and your mind begins to wander, allow it. Just a reminder to come back to self, to breathe at your own pace. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. I will utter her words, not in order, but in alignment. When she writes this poem, she names the wonders that rises. She names the charms that unfold. And what she calls a descendant to earth is what I'm naming a glitch, an opportunity to meet yourself and opportunity, something that you can imagine. Each human heart inspired to act in bounties unconfined. Enlarge the closed, contracted mind and fill it with thy fire. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. One more time, take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. I challenge you to practice what she names as the human heart to inspire to act in bounties unconfined. I invite you to imagine what freedom might look like within your mind. In the midst of this glitch where humanity meets self and opportunity. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. A tender human heart, the smiling graces all surround, with every heavenly heart art. A hymn to humanity in the midst of a glitch, where body meets opportunity. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. And how might our hope grasp just enough to transform an empire that exists? Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. And what wonder shall rise within ourselves to arrive at the moment, at the glitch? Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. In what ways can we enlarge our minds to grasp the imagination and possibility of fire? Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. If we must begin this meditation, begin today by consuming this history, a remembrance of these words, this poet, I invite you to say the names of those who may have remembered you, who may have imagined you, who may have loved you here. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. And on the count of 3, we are going to say those names out loud. Once again, the names of those who have imagined us, dreamed us, prayed us, loved us here. 1, 2, 3, say their names. Napoleon, Danielle, J.C. Larte. We'll say those names a little louder. 1, 2, 3, say their names. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. If we must end this meditation and open ourselves up to the words and the story of this woman, may we end this meditation with our own names as a reminder of the grace that surrounds us all, as a reminder of the glitch that we are yet to meet or have met, an opportunity to meet ourselves and imagination of something different. Let us end this with saying our own names. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth. One more time. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release through your mouth.
Thank you so much, Gia, for that. It brings some great energy to the rest of our evening together. And with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our filmmakers to you. We have Leslie Askew and Turlo White. And so I'll read their bios briefly. Leslie is the founder of Askew Pictures, an independent documentary studio focused on history, culture, and social impact storytelling. Turlo White is the head of production and executive producer at Askew Pictures, overseeing the company's documentary and social impact slate. He has a background in psychology and over a decade of expertise in marketing and business development. And there's more that I will say about Leslie during our panel discussion. But for now, welcome to Leslie and to Turlo.
Hello.
Hi, thank you all firstly for coming. We are so happy to be here. I just would like to start off by giving thanks, and then Turlock can explain maybe how we got here. So thank you firstly to Northeastern, and especially to Cabria Baumgartner and Nicole Aljo, who are featured in the documentary. And I want to say, in a completely biased way, this film would not be what it is without them, without their participation, without their kindness, without the heart that you are about to experience. It was because of them. And I'm just overwhelmed to be here and to share it with you and your community. But this film started because we were commissioned by Mass Humanities to share it in spaces exactly like this. And maybe you want to talk about what the commissioning was?
Yeah, so Mass Humanities said everyone knows Phillis Wheatley. Everyone knows her story. So if we're going to support you, you need to tell a story that not many within Massachusetts would know. And I'd say this film, you were going to, the first half of it will be a reminder of who Phillis is. And the second half is going to open your eyes to a lot that you may not have known about Phillis. So we are hoping that you will leave today not only seeing Phillis as currently a lot of times see her as a one-dimensional poet, but you'll see her in 3 dimensions. I won't tell you what those dimensions are because it will give away the plot line. But I think you will leave today going, I did not know that about her.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoy it. It's approximately 35 minutes long. So yeah, look forward to seeing what
Hearing your comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I'm glad that we had a chance to screen the documentary, and we'll move now into our panel discussion. This panel discussion will broadly look at Phillis Wheatley Peters, but really in the context of public memory and commemoration. So again, I want us to think about too some of the themes that were introduced in the documentary, and if you have questions about that, you can ask that too in the Q&A. This event is part of the Reckonings Community Network series, which is a series of collaborative workshops and gatherings that focus on community history, archiving, and memory making. All of these workshops and gatherings are open to the public and serve as an opportunity to learn from one another and to forge a network of peer-to-peer co-creation and support. I just want to quickly announce the next 2 workshops in the series. There's one later this month, March 18th. It's entitled We Are Boston, a jam session for culture and memory keepers. It's from 5:30 to 9 at the Bowling Building in Roxbury. And then April 3rd, there's a workshop, Awakening the Dragon, role-playing guide, 6:30 to 8:30 right here at Snell Library. So again, if you're interested, you can check out our events page on our website for more details. We also have some flyers there at the entry table when you came in with a QR code. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists, and then I will be moderating that discussion. So they can come up as I introduce them. First, we have Nicole Aljo, Dr. Nicole Aljo. Dr. Aljo is Professor of English and Africana Studies at Northeastern University. Her research focuses on 18th and early 19th century Black Atlantic and Caribbean literature, with a specialization on the slave narrative and early novels. She's the author of the book Creole Testimonies, Slave Narratives from the British West Indies, 1709 to 1836. She's working on 2 projects. The first examines the representations of Caribbean women of color produced in Europe and England between 1780 and 1840. And the second explores relationships between narratives of Black lives and the rise of the novel in 18th century Europe and the Americas. Welcome, Dr. Mitchell. As I mentioned earlier, we have Leslie Askew, who is an award-recognized television producer and documentary director with over 20 years of experience working across the US, UK, Europe, and Australia. Her work has been commissioned by major broadcasters including CNN, ITV, UK, SBS, Australia, Al Jazeera, CBS, BET, and PBS. Her recent projects include Pignorant, currently streaming on Amazon Prime, and I looked this up on IMDb. It's really a fascinating documentary. And Harvesting Justice, a documentary series examining food justice and grassroots activism, set to air on PBS this year. Let's welcome Leslie.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Denise Washington, who uses the power of poetry to bring people together one poem at a time. Born and raised in Roxbury, she is the founder, CEO, and curator of her pop-up poetry series, A Denise Plays Hard event, which creates a safe and non-judgmental space for all people to breathe, listen, recite, and enjoy. Her poem, A Quilt of Greatness, was made into a short film with Akali Jamal Haynes and screened at the 2022 Roxbury International Film Festival. Washington holds an MS in Early Childhood Education from Wheatley College and a BS from Emerson College in Television Production and Creative Writing. And I also want to add, she opened for KRS-One at the Black Market, Buy Back Your Block in Nubian Square. Welcome. Thank you. All right, so I have some questions that I've prepared for our panelists. So I'll start us off, and then maybe after 20 or so minutes, we'll then move into questions from all of you. All right, so thank you all for being here. My first question is to Leslie as the filmmaker. And it's really about how inspiring it is and the messages and themes that you wanted to convey. How and why did you decide to tell the story of Phillis Wheatley Peters? When did you first learn about her? What was the impetus for this project?
I did not plan, I want to say, on making a film about Phillis Wheatley Peters. I was at a documentary conference in 2022, pitching a documentary about structural racism in the Netherlands, actually. And I was having, it was like a very frustrating time, and I was at the cocktail party, and I overheard these two French producers talking about Phillis Wheatley. And I thought, this is bizarre. Like, I'm like in some random place in France, and I tapped on his shoulder and I said, "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" And he started telling me how amazing she was and what an incredible poet and, you know, this groundbreak. And I was like, exactly my face. And I said, I know, because she's African American and obviously she's amazing. It's like, and then I went home and I researched and I said, oh, obviously there must be a film about her. PBS has already done this. So I can just watch it and move on, because what I knew about Phillis was what we're taught in school, in elementary school. You know, you get like that little blurb about her. The frontispiece is even sometimes larger, I feel like, than the actual text about her life. And then we move on to Harriet Tubman or someone else, or, you know, Frederick Douglass. And so, but when I started researching her, I was like, she is so incredible. She felt like, to me, really encompasses so much of how Black women have been defined, and then also in a negative and positive sense. And thought that she, and then learning about her role, her in early American history and how important she was, and not knowing that and feeling kind of duped and robbed of that knowledge, of like not contextualizing her and African people, and especially African and Native people at that time. I was like, this story has to be told.
So, thank you. And I have a question then for you, Denise. As a community member and someone who gives tours in Boston and Roxbury and talks about Phillis Wheatley Peters, how do you think Phillis Wheatley Peters is remembered right here in Boston?
Well, I would say she's remembered with the statue on the Commonwealth Mall. There was a middle school in Roxbury, the Phillis Wheatley Middle School, but it closed down. I can't remember what year.
Mm-hmm.
The tours that I've been giving for almost a decade. We recently got a post stamp,
Yes,
right?
that's
The
right.
postal stamp. I think there should be more.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky you were taught Phillis in school. I was.
Really?
No. And I think about Phillis all the time. She was 8, and I was 8. And that's when I got my first poem published in 2nd grade. If I would have known about Phillis then, that poem probably would have had Phillis in that,
Yeah.
So I am a teacher in the Boston Public School System, so definitely I share and teach Phillis all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We reenact her and dress up like her. Yeah, but I honestly think there should be more. We need more. We need a curriculum about Phillis. I mean, I created a curriculum.
Yeah.
Maybe someone will purchase it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there needs to be more told about her story, and that's why me and Joelle do the tour all the time. Yeah.
And I have a question kind of related to that for you, Denise. When you give these tours, what is most surprising for tourists when they hear about Phillis Wheatley Peters?
They didn't know. Well, and there's a plaque in Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
That's where she was auctioned off.
Yeah.
So lots of people don't even know that. They walk by it every day.
Yeah.
Common people who work in that area don't even, they don't know.
Yeah.
They'll be on the tour and say, I walk by here all the time and I didn't even realize that plaque was there or this happened in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they're surprised about her story. They're surprised that she was auctioned off downtown Boston.
Mm-hmm.
They're surprised that her Commonwealth life was in downtown Crossing, that she went to the church right there, so we got to tell her story.
Yeah.
We have to say her name.
Yeah.
Her story needs to be in schools.
Yeah.
And families need to tell the story too. So we have to keep, I think we just need to share her story.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Nicole, I have the same question for you, especially your connections to Boston and the digital work that you've done. How is Phillis Wheatley Peters remembered here? And maybe how do you teach about Phillis Wheatley Peters in your classes?
So in addition to the statue on the Commonwealth, there's another statue of her, which is actually kind of creepy. It's in the Old South Church.
Yes.
Right. I forgot to mention that one.
Yeah. Because it's creepy.
Yeah.
So, you kind of don't want to remember that it's actually her. So there's that one. There's also Washington's headquarters, which is the Longfellow House in Cambridge. And so they have, it's not a big, huge thing about her, but, they have done talks and, try to integrate her more into the story of that, at least that space. In terms of how I teach Wheatley, so I should out myself in that I didn't initially like Wheatley so I normally teach early African American lit here, and in my own training, I was not a fan of Phillis Wheatley initially. She was taught to me as she was a sellout, and she was not really Black, right? That she was, kind of closer to white folks and that way of being. But my engagement with Wheatley changed after I read her letters, and that really opened her up in terms of, thinking about what she might have been really like, and it also provided a different sense of her voice. So the way that she's taught as this like iconic, right, individual, and then when you read the letters, you get a sense of her as a human being, as a real person, right? Particularly her relationship with Ober Tanner, which is incredibly lovely in the letters, and you get a sense that of the closeness of their relationship, where it feels almost sisterly, the relationship between them. So when I teach Wheatley Peters, I usually start with her letters because I find that that allows students to kind of get a sense of her as a human being, and then we go to her poems, and then people are able to see a little bit more in the poems. They don't see her as this iconic poet. She is, a young woman who's actively, trying to write poems that reflect the things that she wants to get out.
Can I just
Yes.
piggyback on the Longfellow House, because we are doing some research there. We want to know whether, because they said that General Washington invited her to the house, so we're trying to do some research to see if she ever came to that house. I'm also doing a fundraiser because right now they sell her book in the store, but there's no like plaque or anything talking about that, and so we're doing some fundraising around that. And I also will say that I am a descendant of Darby Vassell, who was enslaved on the Longfellow House. So there's a connection there. We're putting it all together.
That's right.
Yes.
And didn't a report come out about the
In July?
Yeah, that's right. If you have a chance to check that out, it was a extensive report. Includes reflections from descendants, but historians were also involved in creating that report. So it's sponsored by the national parks,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
National Park.
So if you go to their website, you can find that. And Dr. Aljo, I had the same interpretation too of Wheatley Peters when I was introduced to her, and the much anthologized poem on being brought from Africa to America, which makes it seem as if Wheatley at that time is somehow content with having been kidnapped during the Middle Passage and then arriving in Boston. It makes it seem like she's content to have had that experience. But I think that would be a misreading of the poems, right? But I realized that later, much too late. So I shared that poem with my students, and I told them that this poem is far more radical once you read it more deeply. So I have a broad question about Peters' life from freedom, right? She was free in West Africa, and then slavery, which she experienced in the Wheatley home, and then emancipation, right, in Boston and even in Middleton, as we saw in the documentary. How does collective memory and the act of remembering function within African American communities? So we can think about Peters, but this is a broader question. Does it function as a form of resistance, as a form of resilience, or something else entirely? And that's a question to all the panelists.
I will say I was obviously thinking of her as well being brought at 8 years old and what she would remember. And for me, her memory, I creatively took the stance that she would have a memory, that she would remember her grandmother, or, she'd remember her language. And so when the film starts out and she's reflecting, like, I want you to be grounded in her memory of her parents and their experience of her enslavement, not her being enslaved and then a property of. I wanted to make sure that you understood she was a human being who would have had memory and connection to, prior to being brought here. And that is what she was mourning, and in that, for me, in that piece. So yes, I think, and that in itself is an act of resistance, because they put so much effort into extracting her from that and whitewashing her. So for me, that was a deliberate choice to kind of position her in that way and frame her in that way.
And can you speak more to that whitewashing that happens to Phillis Wheatley? And I'm thinking here about the Wheatleys themselves.
Yes, absolutely. I think this film is a direct reaction to the Margaretta Odell biography, because when I read about her and learned about her, I was enraged that we were still being she was still being defined by this 19th century biography. And this biography was written by a descendant of her slave, allegedly. I don't think that's even substantiated, but allegedly it was written by a descendant of her slave owners. So her bias is to paint the slave owners as benevolent and all. This idea that we still have like ingrained in us. And it is this internalized racism, to be honest, like this white supremacy that and so for me, in order to combat that, I really focused on centering or prioritizing the historical record instead of being this like assumptions of, or like making these grand generalizations, which Adele does. I stuck to the historical record, and then also humanizing her and centering the African experience as much as I possibly could. And which is why these two wonderful women were integral in doing that, because I needed that Africana studies perspective. And I also needed to understand historically, again, rooting Africans and Native people in this space and time. So anytime I stepped outside of Phillis' story in terms of the historical record, for instance, we don't know where John and Phillis met, but we do know that Africans met in certain spaces, which you talk about, right? So I would allow those types of things, but that's important for our own deeper understanding of who we are and how we got here and how we were in community with one another. And that another way the whitewashing was by isolating her, which I really tried to center her in and amongst this community in Boston. She was a part of other Africans in this community. That's what she came back for, I believe. And so that was another sort of, knock against that whitewashing. So,
Denise?
So on the tour, we often start by saying, okay, she was 8. Who was her mother? Was she a doctor? Was she a lawyer? Who was her father? Her grandmother. She had to speak more than one language. We know that for sure. We're like, yeah, she probably spoke, her native language, maybe French, And then we go to, what did she like to do? We wanted to know all those humanistic things and get people thinking about that, because everyone's always saying, oh, she was a slave. Oh, she was a poet. But we're starting in Africa. Like, what did she like to do? Did she like to swim? Did she, So we have that conversation before we get on the bus to go down to Chinatown to give her, her humanistic characteristics before she came. Before she was bounded,
Yeah. That's important.
And then when she gets here, then we talk about her life here. And we try to feel it when we go to those locations. And by the way, the tour is on April 12th. I suggest that everyone come. It's a Sunday. We meet at the Nubian Library in Nubian Square at 1 o'clock. It's free, and it's sponsored by the Boston Public Library. Yeah.
What type of tours?
It's a walking tour. It's a Phillis Wheatley walking tour. If you want to learn more about her life and step into her life.
Thank you.
I think that collective memory operates in a variety of ways, right? So it, particularly around the case of Wheatley Peters, absolutely it resists simplified narratives and stories, right? So this idea that she's isolated, right? That she is iconic, that she's, that kind of thing. And it also showcases resilience, right? So the fact that, again, right, she was 8 and that the ship that brought her, the Phillis, it had left Africa late in the season, so it was very stormy on the crossing. So she's 8, possibly by herself on the ship for months, for weeks longer than she was supposed to, right? So all of that is just.
And he wasn't supposed to take kids.
Yes, he was not supposed to.
So
Yeah,
annoying.
yeah. Just the I'm trying to think, but yeah. So what and how she created her artwork is incredibly important for us to remember, as well as to engage with, and that the artwork is just as important as presenting her as this iconic individual, right? That it is what she does. Books were her most prized possession. When she when she comes back from London, she writes about her experiences in London. Where the most remarkable passages are where she's writing about the fact that she'd gotten, copies of Paradise Lost, and that it was a really nice copy of Paradise Lost, that she'd gotten that was worth a lot of money. So yeah, I think collective memory is incredibly important in terms of Wheatley. And I will say that I think that she does remember Africa vividly. There are a couple of passages in her poems where she does actually reference Africa in some way, shape, or form. And what is amazing is that she consistently does it in a positive way. So this is very different than everyone else who's writing about Africa in the 18th century, with the exception of a couple of people. But Wheatley Peters is writing about Africa as being this beautiful place. She writes about the color black as also being beautiful. She, when she's talking about the color black, she refers to it as jet. She refers to it as ebony. These are a really wonderful interventions that she is making in terms of the language that we are using, right, to describe Black people.
That's right. That's right. It makes me think of the phrase "Black is beautiful," which we might associate with the 70s.
Yes.
But it has this 18th century.
Absolutely.
origins,
Absolutely.
Right?
This is how I teach it, that really starts the Black is beautiful movement.
I love that. I love that. This question is for Nicole and Denise. After watching the documentary, how does the documentary challenge or deepen, complicate, or even affirm your earlier views of Phillis Wheatley Peters?
So basically everything in the film I already knew. So it just affirmed everything for me, you know. Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is accurate, We're still trying to find out where she's buried, That's something, a project that we keep trying to just dig paperwork to see if we'll ever find out, because a lot of people say the Cobbs, but there's no documentation, so we can't say. We say maybe, but there's no documentation.
Yeah, I think for me, it confirmed the misrepresentations of the complexities of her life, right? That the iconic portrait that we know of her really constrains our understanding of her. And the constraint, if you look at that illustration, it's I mean, yes, it's a lovely representation of her, but it's bounded by this rondel that says Phillis Wheatley, Negro servant of Negro servant to Mr. John Wheatley of Boston. And so that is always following her in all of these images. And so for me, the film really allowed me to see her outside of that. That finally she's unshackled, untethered, from this rondel. And so we can appreciate her as a full, complex individual. And I don't know, Leslie, if you want to share the Vin Coretta little interchange about John Peters.
Which one?
So the cringe, Vin Coretta.
Oh, yes. About John Peters?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm sure everybody usually giggles at the point where we're describing him, because this is also as much about John and reimagining in the memory of John, which we can talk about, because the Odell biography really to this day has ruined what we believed that he was. He was supposed to be this ne'er-do-well and whatever, and so I did try to reclaim that narrative and set the record straight to as much as I can. But Vincent Coretta, her biographer, it was really important for me to add in his feeling about John being an attractive man, right? Because that was another way of creating her as this woman. She's this three-dimensional person, really humanizes her and gives her a sense of sexuality, which she had been completely devoid and denied. If anything, she's this angelic figure, and so yes, it's funny, but I think it's also really good to keep her alive in a more real way.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just come to my
Yes.
mind. I keep getting this question, and you were the perfect people to answer this question, because a lot of people are upset by what happened to her second volume of poems, but the question is, do you think that she would have been successful publishing her book if she stayed in London? And I don't know how to answer that.
So the publication networks are definitely stronger and more robust in London. So it would have been easier for her to publish in London, and it would have been easier for the books to be sold. You know, it would have been easier for her to get subscribers if that was how they decided to publish it. That was much harder in the States, and that was part of the reason why. She goes over that. There's a longer history of print culture and circulation in the UK than there was in the colonies at that time. And then this is also post-war period, right? So post-war, so getting paper would be really expensive. Getting ink would also be really expensive. It would have been complicated.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Most likely it would have been better than he did.
And that gives it something truly remarkable that she comes back to Boston, right?
Yes.
I don't know if she would have been aware of that, right? That if she had stayed in London, that maybe her career would have thrived. I don't know if that was a calculation that she made, but she knew she wanted to come back to Boston, right? There was a community there for her. And I was also struck by something you just said, Leslie, in that you wanted to kind of reclaim John Peters, especially in the way that he had been portrayed in the Odell biography. And it made me think about how important it is, especially in early America, to talk about Black love, to talk about a Black man and a Black woman in love as a family, especially at a moment when slavery is constantly hovering, threatening, breaking those familial ties. So I think that was something that came across really beautifully in the documentary.
You can include him in your tour now.
Oh, we do.
Oh, you do?
We talk about Black love and
Oh,
the union.
lovely.
Yeah, so
Yes.
because we want to make her a human, we're just,
Absolutely.
so we're debunking all this negativity.
That's right.
So we talk about him. That's why we attach Wheatley Peters.
Right.
That's why.
So related to this, then, why do you think it's important to tell and retell stories of the past, especially in early African American history and African American literature? And so maybe Nicole, you can take the first stab at that question, and then Leslie, and then Denise.
Sure. I think it's crucial that we engage these stories, and it really is unfortunate that we don't, particularly around early Black Atlantic literature and archives. I'm sure you noticed in terms of the talking heads in the film was mostly older folks, right? So, I think it really is important that everyone participate in telling these stories, because then other people are going to tell the story for you, right? And it might not be the way, right, that you want it to come out. And I think Wheatley Peters in particular is important because she's just this foundational figure, right? Not only in terms of African American literature, but in terms of women's literature, in terms of poetry and aesthetics in this country as well. It's necessary that we tell these early stories. And actually, this early stuff, really crazy stuff goes on in this early period as well. So it's a lot more vivid, a lot more dynamic, a lot crazier than people assume. So you'll think that, it's like old-fashioned folks, it's going to be dry and boring. And the things that I have seen in the archive are just incredible. And I will just leave it at that.
Yeah, wild. Absolutely. But I will say, just to your point, when I started doing this research, the two main biographers are white men. And so I really had to struggle to find her still after reading these two books. I was like, where is she? And that is still, I think, work that needs to be done. Because even when you read Honoré Fannin Jeffers' book, which is incredible, and that kind of like cracked my brain open of like really understanding what her interior life would have been like, and really understand, the threat of slavery and what she would have experienced, instead of this nice, genteel person. Even how I represented her, that wasn't intentional. That was through AI. I wasn't able to, but like. So for instance, in the film, she's like sitting so politely writing at a desk, which is how we depict her. I wanted it to be like pitch black, light, candlelight, because I imagined she would have had to work, and then she wrote after work, so so that was lovely, but it would be incredible to have a biography where we could read, and all of that context, that African context, was already built in. Sorry, I just wanted to make that rant and appeal to you good people here, because people keep asking me, like, what do you think else could be happening? Like, we need to go back to the beginning and write a biography again of her. I think it's worth telling. What was your question?
Yeah, you've answered it.
Okay, good,
Telling
good.
and retelling of stories.
Yes, absolutely.
So in order to tell someone else's story, you have to tell your own stories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do a workshop with Brother Joel. He's the one who collaborates with our tour, and it's called Telling Our Own Stories Matter through poetry and genealogy, because he's the guru. He's the historian and guru on AI and genealogy. Mm-hmm. And so right now we're working with Great Minds, Chip Greenwich's organization, with they're high school students from all over Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And so we're exposing them to poetry, and through poetry they're telling their stories. Mm-hmm. And then we will talk about Phillis and how you get to tell her story. But I will have to say, I wrote a poem when I was I think I was a sophomore at Emerson College, and it has evolved to this day, because when we got shut down with the pandemic, lots of organizations was like, okay, we want programming, but we can't have in public events. So can you put your poem onto a video? So I reenacted myself in another character. Mm-hmm. And when I look at that video, instantly after we wrapped up the production, I was like, that's Phillis. That's Phillis, and that's Frederick Douglass. Ooh. And so you can see that video on YouTube if you want. It's called Enslaved Africans. So that was another way of me retelling her story through my poem. Right. So those are the kind of things. First, you have to know about yourself, appreciate your stories, appreciate your family, appreciate your grandmother, knowing where you come from in order to do and understand the other work. It's a layer kind of thing going on. But appreciate yourself first. Yeah. And knowing that you have a history, and it's important, and that we have to tell our stories. That's the only way. Mm-hmm. You don't want anyone telling you about yourself, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's great advice. That's great advice. And maybe this is a question to follow up, Denise, for you, thinking about memory making, right, as an active process. How does community archiving or community engagement, the work you've done, especially with high school students, the work you do in your own classroom, the work you do in the community, how does it expand who gets remembered in public?
Well, it all starts with yourself, right? And then we go, and it can evolve in all sorts of things, like in the garden. Mm-hmm. We're planting, and all of a sudden we're talking about George Washington Carver, and then we're sketching about him, and then it can happen at the playground. Mm-hmm. At first we're talking about tennis, and then we're talking about the Venus and Serena. Mm-hmm. So it's all about what you do, and then layering it with literature. Mm-hmm. And then that's when you decide who you're going to tell your story and who you're going to remember. Mm-hmm. But it's all about yourself first. Yeah. Can I add something? Yes. You want to remember yourself. Yeah.
So I just wanted to add, I direct a digital project called the Early Black Boston Digital Almanac, and one part of that project, we worked with the Portia Willow, who is the former Boston Poet Laureate, and she worked with students at the O'Brien School English class, and basically the students read Phillis Wheatley alongside with Portia, and then they wrote their own poems about Boston, inspired by the poetry of Portia as well as Phillis Wheatley, and you can see those poems on our website, which is ebbda.org. But there's a whole host of these poems that the students have put together. They're just really lovely meditations on Boston, on poetry, on self and identity as well.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. And you see also, too, the benefit of collaboration and how this work reaches far and wide. So I have one more question. But as I finish up, I would love to hear from all of you. So be thinking about a question that you have for our panelists, for our filmmakers. This question is for Leslie, and why you think it is important for historically minoritized communities, communities of color, to reclaim and revise dominant narratives. Why is it important? Why is it useful? And why do you think it's especially urgent right now?
Well, I think it's, as I said at the beginning, I think it's important. Firstly, I think it's important that we know who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first learned about Phillis, I felt like I didn't know who I was as an American in a way that is foundational. And as I said, I felt robbed, basically. And I realized quickly, when you don't know who you are, people can tell you who you are, and they will continue to tell you who you are. And you, again, with that public memory, the more you are told things, the more you believe them. And if you don't know they're telling you ignorance, then you just believe it and you buy it. And then what I've learned about from Odell is that these lies just get so in our DNA and in our, just the lies. And so when I started making this film, I thought this is an important story to kind of redress. But now, as history, alive, the world has evolved even more so, where these things, this public memory is being, and historical record is actually being attacked. It is even more so important. And I think hopefully with this project, we can, kind of make gains in that. And that we will not fall victim, I think, to the stories that people tell ourselves. And as you so beautifully put, know who you are. And I think that's on all facets. Do not allow people to tell you you do not belong here. Do not allow people to tell you you were not a part of the making of this country. And like this young woman came up to me and she said, "Oh, I'm from Senegal, I'm African, I don't really know how I fit in here, or if this is my country, or if this is my story, but when I see Phillis, it makes me feel like there is some part of belonging that I'm here." And I was like, absolutely. Like, this country would not be what it is if it wasn't for African people, not African Americans, African people. So yes, I think it's incredibly vital.
That's right. Denise or Nicole, anything to add?
I'm sorry, what was the question? I got so involved.
Yes, exactly. Just thinking about why is it urgent now to resist and challenge dominant narratives? If you just wanted to add something.
Now is the time to do it, especially with the erasure going on. You have to tell our stories.
Yeah, because there's so many possibilities in terms of telling our stories, right? In terms of frameworks, right? You can self-publish, right? Write poetry, do artwork, do music.
Sure.
I think there's so many venues now to get our voices out there. And I think it behooves us to do that, because so much in the past, people were not allowed, right, to get their voices out in these kinds of ways. So
I agree.
Can I ask a question to you, Bria?
Yeah.
Just back in terms of who gets remembered and who doesn't as a historian. Because learning this, through Phillis, I learned about so many African writers, especially. So why is So why not Lucy Terry or someone, you know what I mean? Like, why is it, I mean, I understand why it's Phillis Wheatley because of her enormous accomplishment of being the first, but why aren't these other figures more recognized or trumpeted? And how does that, it is a selection. It's deciding I'm going to do this and I'm not going to focus on her. But that erasure is so, or like I did Obertanner dirty in this film by not being like, she was amazing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I understand the instinct is just to be like, okay, we need to move to the next bit. But, you know, I wish I could have been like, Ober really helped her sell these books and like really was there for her and was her girl and like, did, you know, like that's, so I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's one we can all kind of take up. I will say, I've been looking at the story of an African American girl in the 19th century who was kidnapped and brought to Essex County, so the same area where Phyllis and John ended up living. And I thought about her story and the fact that we don't know much at all about her. And because she didn't do something that might be considered distinctive, like publish poetry or write a novel, we don't really have her story, her full story to tell. We don't even have part of her story to tell. I just found her in a census record, right? So there is this sense that what makes us remember people and remember their accomplishments, it's maybe because they did something particularly distinctive. But I would say in the documentary, you did such a great job of putting Wheatley Peters in community and with a family, not the Wheatleys, right? But with her husband and her child. And again, with Obertanner and that community. And so even though we couldn't tell Obertanner's story in the documentary, we still understand Wheatley as part of that. And I think that is important, right? We're not doing this alone. We're not doing life alone, right? We're doing it in community and with people. And I think the other response to your question is that a lot of these people were famous at the time, so the 18th century and 19th century, so people would have known about them then. But in the intervening years, right, there were professional historians, right, who came in, went to the archives, and they created a particular narrative that, well, they glommed onto Phillis Wheatley Peters. It's like, well, we don't care about anybody else, right? Here's this one individual.
Right.
So the fact that there's, Ignatius Sancho writing, Britton Hammond, right, Jupiter Hammond, right, Lucy Terry, right, Mariah Stewart, David Walker, right, all these people who were writing at this time, no, right, you can only have one. So, I mean, it's,
We need to take it back.
Francis Williams,
Yeah.
I could go on. So many names. 18th century folks who were doing really cool stuff that, got lost in the shuffle.
That's right. We remember all of them. Awesome. So we'll open it up to questions from all of you. There's a question back. Yes, please stand up.
Hi, my name is Dell Hamilton. I'm an artist and a curator. Greetings from the Hutchins Center for African and African Research. We're in the States 2 years ago. So I was super happy to see him in the credits, but also Hollis Robbins is in residence with us this year.
Oh, great.
So I have a question and a footnote. So question from Leslie, if you could talk a little bit more about AI and how that impacts the process. And then a footnote in terms of culture. When you mentioned Grenville Sharp, that automatically made me think about the current show that we have up now at the Hutchins Center. It's called Renaissance Race and Representation. We have a print by Patrick Henry Reason, who's an African American engraver, printmaker, and it's a portrait of Grenville Sharp from 1836 as part of the Mary Kelly collection of African American art. So happy to talk about that show at some point. But then also the print of Crispus Attucks.
Yes.
That print is currently at the Boston Public Library in a show called Revolution. So, things.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you. So AI was a last resort creative decision that I had to make. So in terms of who is memorialized, I was told multiple times in the making of this that this story is not possible because we only have one image of Phyllis. And so it's very difficult to pick someone else. And I was frustrated by that and already knew I was going to use atmospheric reenactments, which you see through it. And then obviously I have her writings, which is incredible. And I thought that's the way I'm going to bring her to life, is through her written word. And then it really came to like the last iteration of the film where I was like, I need to, in order to bring her more, and especially John, because we've never seen anything of him, I can't just have a portrait of him and him be faceless. Like, and so I partnered with an AI historical reenactment company and strategically chose to only use it when I was trying to bring them forward in their humanity. Not to, when it was her work, she could speak to her work herself. There doesn't need to be this this artificial person doing so. It was really to show her in the act of being an artist, in the act of getting married, in being a mother, these types of moments where you really needed to kind of see her. And so yes, that was strategically placed throughout intentionally, and why I wanted to make her intentionally transform from that frontispiece into the AI, so you know that this is going to be a device that's used, but it's not going to one that's going to be kind of dominate and take over. So. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My name is Kehinde, doctoral researcher for Breakthrough Projects. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. When questions of memory are being talked about, I think the next thing that often comes to mind is the question of evidence. Look at the film itself, cult records, some of those things. And I wanted to direct us to the question of evidence, which I think is also very important. And I think there is a position in which, as artists, as historian, as literary scholar, or, as individual, there is a position in which we come into evidence. And especially in cases where what disappeared and what did not disappear also becomes evidence, to look at. So, and I was wondering, how the position, in which, as a filmmaker, you made mention of how, the decision of the use of AI, and these other things to portray other things. So maybe if you could speak more, about how you come into, to doing this kind of work, with this evidence, what is not there and what is not, and what is there, and like secondly, just to add, I think there is a depth in which we hold evidence. There is a depth as artists, as individuals, that we hold evidence. Do you think you have fulfilled that depth in talking about the life of, the wonderful life of Phillis now? I was wondering if we had to discover, or if we had to invent Wheatley, Phillis, from evidence that are not of our, from evidence of the 250s. How do we, what depth do we hold Phillis, when we read those evidences? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's twofold when I'm retelling this story. So it was the telling of Phyllis's story, and for that I strongly leaned into the letters, not her poems intentionally, because her poems can be interpreted one way or the other, and I have to make originally supposed to be a 15-minute film, and it blew out to 35 minutes. I don't have the time to, be accurate and to display both sides of the argument and to allow the academics to have their say. So with the letters, you can't, as Nicole says, you can't really argue that this is her voice. And so that's why you see so many letters in here. You see the letters up close of actually what the words were. I have multiple people in concert speaking about what they all believe, what she's saying in unison. So I feel very strongly that, yes, I did that right. but I was a lot, but that wasn't intentionally what I set out to do. When I sat down with all of them, I was going to go into detail into the poems and this, and then as I'm interviewing them, I'm like, uh-oh, this is going to be a problem. Like, she's saying one thing, and I'd be like, well, Nicole Vincent said this, and she's like, well, you know what? I'm not 100% sure. And so I'm like, well, okay, I have to make a choice here. And so the one that I kept in was about Harvard, right? Because everyone agreed about that. Mm-hmm. And because she was young, she was making a statement, like all of these things, everyone agreed, so that's what stayed in. And then when it came to John, because that research is so new, right? So that was also very fortunate in terms of the timing of this film, is that Cornelia Dayton just found those records in 2022. So, and she has over 100 of them, which she provided me, so I could see for myself, which is also quite incredible, and read them as much as I could, because they're also incredibly illegible if you've ever written court documents. So, but there is a lot lost. This is also where I was like, oh my God, you could do a whole thing about Africans in the legal system in the beginning of time. Like, who's writing this book? Because Dinah Cubber is painted as the villain, right? Yeah. I know I'm gonna have to, when I make the longer film, I will balance this out heavily, because in her court documents, she marks her signature with an X, and it says her mark over it, right? So she would have been relaying that to, presumably, a white person, telling them her story. So this is being filtered. She was going to be willed $100 if she stayed with the widow, right? So there's all this context around her story and why she's there that I don't include in the film, which I should. So, but that informs the record. You can't read that without knowing, because that's disingenuous as well. And then her and John already knew each other. They were part of the same, in the same, the Wilkins family, not family, they were part of the same household for years. So I did find it mostly tricky with the court records of treading very carefully. And it had many iterations, and was like, I'm just going to stick to the bare facts of this, because it's still ongoing, and she's writing a biography about him, and it could change also, because this could be evergreen, because in a year or two, she could find something else out. Yeah, so I wasn't like, this definitively, this is it. So yeah, time will tell, which is exciting.
I think it's a good question to, Nicole, I'd like to hear your perspective on this, because there is a bit of a divide when we're thinking about literary scholars and historians, because historians, we rely so much on not just evidence, but written evidence. Of course, I think maybe in the 20th century, and now there's an opening for oral histories, and we bring that into our work. But when we're studying early African American history, we're thinking about evidence, written evidence. And we should have a fidelity to that evidence. What I like about the documentary, and especially about the work that Nina Dayton did, is she said, go to the archive. And don't just go to the archive and look at what's obvious. Dig deeper. She is the one, she's a legal scholar. I think she's been in the academy for 30 years. This is the work that she does, going into legal records and looking at court cases. And she's the one that found that link between John Peters in Middleton, which led us to Phillis. These were Phyllis's lost years. We had no idea what happened to her. And here we finally know she's in Middleton. And that's archival research. There are millions of documents that historians have not looked through connected to Black folks right here in Boston. So I encourage my students to do some of that work if you're interested, but archival research can be so much fun for these kinds of discoveries.
Yeah, thank God.
Hi, my name is Thank God. Thank you so much for the talk, anchoring it. So I have two questions, one for Nicole. Earlier you mentioned how in your life and in your career you're not a fan of Phillis Wheatley. So how do you think is the best way to curate an education or an introduction into the works of Phillis Wheatley for someone who is interested, so that they don't encounter that same kind of gridlock you had, so that and they might not even have the opportunity to like break through that bias. And the second question is about AI. We know about the vast potential of AI and also the issues of ethics. It played an important role for you in bringing it to life, Phillis and her husband. Do you think it's going to play a more active role in the future with regards to historical figures that have been lost that we don't have evidence about? Do you think they are going to play an active role, and do you see him doing a good job about it?
Yeah, so in terms of trying to get into Wheatley, as I mentioned before, like I think I shouldn't say I think what I do in my classes is I usually give students the letters first, and I usually give them the letters between Wheatley Peters and Ober Tanner, because those are they're just lovely. So you get a real sense of Wheatley Peters as a human being, as a young woman who's seeking to make connections. She is so happy that Ober Tanner has written her back. I gather that they met maybe at church or something like that. And then Wheatley Peters writes back, "I'm so thrilled that you wrote me. I'm so glad to hear from you. I'm glad that we will be able to commune in this way." And they talk a lot about their spirituality, and you kind of get the sense that they are like helping each other kind of find their way to God and understand, how God operates. And in the 18th century, this is the Great Awakening. So there's all of this religious fervor, but at the same time, there are churches are segregated. They're segregated. So that these two women are engaging in this very dynamic conversation is very enticing and allows you to see Wheatley as a human being. And then when you go to read her poems, then you don't read them as, these are Wheatley's poems that are, there are, heroic couplets and it's this rhyme scheme, right? Instead, you can pay more attention to her voice and, why she's choosing to write a poem to students at Harvard, right? And maybe think about how that occasion came about. And then just think about just the optics of that, right? A young enslaved Black woman speaking to, a whole host probably of white men who are, probably enslavers themselves, right? And so like thinking about that completely refigures the poetry for me. And I no longer see it as dry as I did, back when I was an undergraduate student. I can see the dynamism. I can see what she's trying to do with the poetry in a way that I couldn't when I just looked at the poetry itself.
And just to piggyback on what you were saying, another request I have to the academic community, it would have been really good to have like an anthology, or maybe this exists, of writings of that time from African people. So I could have read works that she would have also come into contact with. So like, for instance, like Prince Hall, or just like newspaper clips, like publications of other African people, because I thought about that all the time when I was like, she would have read the paper. What was she reading? How did that impact her work? How did that impact her writing style?
And we know they're reading each other because Ignacio Sancho in his letters, writes about reading her poetry, and he's the first person to call her a genius in bondage.
Yes.
This is a Black man talking about, Phillis Wheatley, genius in bondage.
Yes, exactly. So that would be a good resource. So in terms of AI, yes, I think it is the future of historical reenactment. I chose specifically ethically to use it more in the fashion of like animation and not to use it in its full blown extent. But I do think it does serve, I cautiously say it does serve a role in telling stories about people who aren't fairly represented in history. But AI is problematic for all of the reasons, and I will speak to it, that we know. It is incredibly biased, borderline racist. And I will say this, in the making of this film, I had to like, and I don't know if it's the programming or the user, like, but I had to fight them over like her hair and her complexion. They wanted her to be light skinned. They wanted her to have straight hair. I had so many iterations where I was like, no, like this what she looked like. Like, why can't you just make her look like this? And no, AI said no. AI kept saying no, 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 no. So you will see Phyllis literally changes every time because it would not just lock on to one iteration of her. And so, and especially her hair, I was like, why can't she just have an afro? I don't understand. It just wouldn't do it. And so that's why I cautiously say, yes, it's good, but it is not perfect. And no, and when I make the longer film, no, I will not be relying on it because it is not reliable. I don't know what I will do, but I will have to figure out something else. It served its purpose for this, but it isn't perfect. It isn't perfect, yeah.
Sure. Rita?
Denise, I wonder whether you would be willing to say a bit more about your use of AI as well in your practices, because you mentioned it briefly, and I think it's such an important question for all of us that can be both somewhat empowering in creating representations that people can relate to, but also has all these problems that have been mentioned already. So I would just love to hear a little bit more about that as well.
So in 2024, my principal was like, okay, we're gonna have a professional development. You guys are gonna do ChatGPT and AI because she felt like it could be motivating for the kids if we integrated AI and ChatGPT in some of our lesson plans. So I'm like, okay. And it was interesting, and we had a really good facilitator. And like I said, this extensive work around Darby Basso, who I am a descendant of. Well, the National Park Services, they created a pilgrimage to Antigua and also to Jamaica because they found that he had ties there. But while we were there were no pictures of Darby Basso, his grandmother, because his grandmother Ava was enslaved in Antigua, or his mother, but all these pictures of the enslavers. And I'm like, there's no pictures of Darby Basso at all? No. Not up until now, there's no pictures. So I decided, because I'm a family of pictures and we work around pictures, and I was like, okay, I'm going to create a picture of Darby Basso when he was 5, when he encountered George Washington, because he had an encounter with George Washington. And I'm going to create a Darby Basso when he was an adult, when he went back to the house after living in Beacon Hill. And my collaborator, Joelle, who, like I said, is the AI and ChatGPT guru, he sat with me. I had to do it all myself, but he sat with me. You have to be really specific about, you have to be really specific about the person and what you're trying to create. So I just typed in everything about Darby when he was 5. And then it spit back to me, okay, do you want light skin or, dark skin? And I said, yes, I wanted this. And so I did. And they gave me everything I wanted. We didn't have to go back and forth. But you have to be very, very specific. And so this is Darby Basso at 5 when he had his encounter with... And so here's the crazy thing about this picture. Everyone was like, oh, did you use any pictures to help you develop that picture? And I said, no. However, he looks just like my father's baby picture. And then I was looking at my uncle. He looks just like him too. And I'm like, I didn't use any pictures of, I didn't use any family pictures. It was just all typing in, all his descriptions. He lived, he was enslaved on the Longfellow House and everything. Same with Darby Basso as an adult. So he looks like my uncles and my father. And we didn't use any pictures at all.
Amazing.
And I didn't use any descriptions of my family at all. I just used the descriptions and the information that we had about Darby Vassell. So you do have to be very specific about exactly what you're trying to create and what you want. Yeah. And on a sidebar, I can show you my father's picture, and you'll see how they look alike. And we didn't use that. So yeah.
Do you encourage your students to use
Yeah,
AI?
well, because we had that
workshop?
professional
Yeah.
development, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
in fun and fun ways like creating pictures or doing research, a lot of research. Yeah,
It's great.
And this is another footnote. The reason why there's no footnotes is because photography is limited to
Yes,
as much as
exactly. And a footnote to that footnote is that I was going to use paintings to illustrate Africans of the time. And then when I met with the curator, or one of the curators at the Folk Art Museum, they had an amazing exhibition about Africans in art in the early America. And she was like, there's only 3 depictions, positive depictions of Africans that you could possibly use. The rest are so bad and negative that you wouldn't want to use, derogatory, you would not want to use them. So I thought that was, I could show people, and that would be my way of expanding it out, showing people getting married or everyday life, like, showing it through paintings. But that wasn't possible, so.
I will have to say there is a doll that was created of Darby Vassell in 1800s that I didn't know anything about. When I unveiled those pictures, it was at I do a Juneteenth event. It will be my 5th year doing it at the Longfellow House this June to honor Darby Vassell and his family and anyone else who was enslaved on that land. And so when I unveiled these pictures, one of the professors from Harvard came up to me and she was like, "Oh, there is a doll that someone created of him." And I wanted to cry because that doll doesn't have any humanistic features whatsoever. Huh? It's traveling around. I don't know currently where it is, but it is in an exhibit. But I have pictures to show you. And I was so happy that I created those pictures because I was like, I definitely know he didn't look like that doll.
Yeah, that's sweet. Yeah. We have time for one more question.
You saw the pictures.
Thanks.
I think the microphone.
Excuse me.
Thanks to all of you for just such a wonderful panel discussion. Am I remembering correctly that the artist who made the image of her was also an enslaved African man? Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you maybe think out loud about him as part of this Black community that you have taught us about in Boston in the late 18th century?
Absolutely. Just makes me think of all the things I did not include. But Scipio Moorhead is his name. And what is believed is that he was an associate of the Wheatley family as well. So they would have known each other. And he was commissioned to do this frontispiece for a Phillis. And she chose him, right? More or less, to do so. And she writes a poem to him, basically thanking him for it. No, I'm not going to say that. He was trained similarly. What I'm trying to say is similarly to Phillis, he was trained in his art, which wasn't an uncommon thing. They enslaved people were trained in different skills, and his was art, but it could have been carpentry, whatever. And then those people were lent out in order to make money off of. So that's also something very interesting I learned, which I think helps contextualize, and that's why I position it as the Wheatleys benefited socially from her knowledge and her being this exceptional figure, because socially they would have gotten the clout from it. And that was not an uncommon thing for white enslaved owners on many different levels to profit off of the enslaved in many different fashions. So, but yes, it was incredible that she had this relationship with him, and that he made this frontispiece. 100%. And same with Samson Occam. She would have been in relationship with him, who was a Native American minister, who was well known at the time. And so that also, I love that connection, and that he was a type of mentor or at least example for her because they had the same benefactor. So she knew, see, that's what's so great. Is like she knew, okay, you gave money to him, so I'm going to ask for, and as well. So this like hubris she has, it's all still contextual, so it's all she knows. And she's like, well, I'm going to act on that as well. So.
Wonderful. Well, join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you. For a fantastic conversation, especially contextualizing the documentary. I want to turn now to Jija Azaglo to offer her concluding remarks on what I think has been a wonderful evening together.
Can you just give another round of applause for our beautiful panelists? And give an applause for yourself. This was such a powerful conversation in response to this amazing screening. So thank you so much for your offerings.
Thank you.
I can't help but think about the importance of history keeping and how we're all responsible for doing this work. But also the power of poetry as an archive. And this woman who recorded herself and said, I'm using poetry to record myself, to write myself into history. And so one of the questions that is ringing for me that was in the film, is like what liberty lives within us. And so the invitation for us here is what gifts live within us that convey our history, our freedom, ourselves, our own narratives. This Reckonings Community Network series is really exploring that. And we use workshops, we use things like screening and gatherings to invite folks to really think about what is our responsibility to keep our history alive. Right? To keep ourselves alive, to keep our memories alive. And so this invitation for you, as we're ending, is to reflect, is to remember. And we have a saying at Reckonings in which we say creating an archive is a way of saying that we are here, and we were here. And so the invitation that I have for you in this moment is to repeat after me. Is that all right? All right, so we've been sitting for too long. Can we get up on our feet? Yes. Maybe stretch a little bit. Yes. So we're going to say this out loud as a reminder to ourselves, but also as an invitation, as a responsibility that when we leave from this moment, right, all of these ways that this history has been displayed looks very different. So there's a documentary, there are works that have been written, there's poetry, a poetry walking tour more specifically, but it doesn't stop there. We all have skills and we all have gifts that we have come into the space with, that we are all responsible for the ways that communities and history, is remembered, right? So repeat after me. We are here.
We are here.
We were here.
We were here.
Creating an archive is a way of saying we are here.
We are here.
And we were here.
And we were here.
Y'all believe that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, give yourselves a round of applause. Beautiful. So once again, I want to thank I want to thank Cabria. I want to thank Jen for the Reckonings Project. I also would like to thank this amazing documentary. Cabria, Nicole, and then Denise also for being on the panel as well. Give a round of applause. I remind Denise has a walking tour that's happening in April. If you want more information, please go up to her and ask more information. Once again, on March 18th, we are inviting folks who are doing this work to come together to be in conversation with one another. We also have some amazing people that will be in the space. We have a panel discussion that's happening of people who are doing this work on collecting our history, on keeping our culture. And so we invite you to come. And it's not too far from here. It's at the Bruce Boylan building. So please, please, please make sure you come. If you want to find out all of the events that we're having, we have a QR code on that table. There's also 4 pictures of Phillis Wheatley that we wanted to display. There's a picture of her desk, the picture of the book that was also featured in the film. There's also her writing of a poem called Atheist, and then there's her sculpture there as well. So feel free to look at that. Make sure you take some stickers. If you want to join our mailing list, there's also a list there. Feel free to write your names just so that you're in tune with all of the events that we have going. So thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.